I think you can start.
Okay.
I'm still doing. I was born in South Africa, Bloemfontein. That is the Orange Free State. I was raised there. Went to
Wait, what's that noise? Everyone needs to mute.
Okay, are you getting my images on?
Are you sharing the screen?
I'm trying to anyway.
I personally don't see it.
Okay. Let's see if I can get to see the thing.
While you're working on that, I just want to let you know that Jennifer from Samson Hardware is here and can hear and see you. So
excellent. I was hoping that would happen.
there you go.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're ready to start.
Yep.
All right. I've put this together from a selection of photos that I have, and I really have 4 subsections. One deals, if in fairly short order, with the history. The second portion deals with the store in operation, and then the third shows what the building looks like empty, and
Marvin, you're muted. Marvin, you are muted. Unmute yourself.
is that okay now? Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is pretty much a unique endeavor in Fairbanks, where there's been a particular institution that spans a lot of time, 104 years actually for being in the same location. The structure itself has changed quite a bit over time, even though it's in the same place. And the most salient change has been the walls. Originally, they were primarily a wood frame with some metal on top, and a more substantial one was put in place. And that change is what caused the application for being a historic officially a protected historic property when it went through, because then the reviewer said, well, they changed the wall, so it's not as ancient as one would like. So that protection then was not given to Samsons. Here's an ad that Samson put in the paper, and it shows how it's moved through time. The current structure was built, I believe, in 1906. And you can see how it's changed over time. The central picture here it shows that it has changed the windows in the front. The businesses involved. The store was very much into automobiles and repairing them and all that. And you can see that just to the right of the main entry. And also there was a rather complete operation to make things out of metal in various ways. There were both electric and plumbing operations that were associated with Samson as well. They've done a lot of different kinds of business at times. This shows the repairing of boats lined up. There are a number of pictures with early pontoon aircraft parked here too. Later than this, of course, but when people were still using the river to fly from. I didn't include one of those, but there are several photographs of that. And in the early days, Samson was heavily involved with the mining industry, supplying all kinds of stuff, including boilers to thaw frozen ground and a lot of heavy pieces of machinery. And just like all of Fairbanks, it was really plagued with floods, primarily in breakup time, sometimes otherwise. I have some historical footage that I didn't include in this show, showing Samson during the 1949 flood and in the 1967 flood. And you notice that the off to the side, the structures around Samson has changed over time. Eventually, there's a train depot involved, a little back to the right, and some of the buildings have turned into parking lots and that sort of thing. And of course, there were close calls over time, fires and such. And you'll see the Ford sign here because Samson had the franchise for Ford automobiles for a number of years. And this is how it looked in 1954. Still doing a business in automobile parts. And once again, the windows haven't been changed yet to their current, what became their final aspect. And in the area about 2007 to 2009, there were a number of articles in the News Miner regarding the history of Samson. And here we have somebody remembering the car that they bought, and then posing much later on a trip back to Fairbanks. And what became very prominent for quite a while, actually, was the fact that a new bridge was going to be constructed. It took years before it actually happened, but the News Miner was picking up on this. And here we have the businesses involved that would be wiped out, all except for the big I, which would remain. Everything else went. And back in the warehouses, only the old NC structure lasted. Everything else was torn down. So it was a big deal when the thing closed down. And Samson was considered a real asset over time. I mean, it was generally recognized, and there are a lot of reasons for that. You can't really read the text here on a screen very well, but there have been several attempts to write histories, including one that was published by Samsons itself in 1984, and Jennifer provided that to me. I found it the most succinct history. It's well written. I don't know how much it's available these days, but in any case, it's worth a read if you can find it. And there was recognition, I think, of the kind of services that Samson provided, that the News Miner picked up on. And there were columns dealing with Samson Hardware. So people were paying attention, and it had Fairbanks' attention. And one reason that people were interested in Am I still on?
You're back on.
Okay, I don't know what's happening. It just clicks itself off every once in a while, or something happens. Anyway, it turns out that even at the last years of Samson in this location, they could find and fix things that no one else could, and it reflects on the kind of inventory that Samson has had over the years. There were a remarkably small number of people who actually owned and ran the thing. The first that we have here is after the original boosters who were more into gold claims than they were in hardware. After that period left, Jimmy Barrack was a long time owner, followed by Johnny Albright. And then Joe Jakovich. And so the operation went through a number of different eras with different challenges. The title of this talk was a common refrain. If you can find it, we have it. Refers to the heyday of Johnny's operation. Not very friendly in terms of computers in those days. Much differently run now, of course. My experience has been that the employees at Samson's fully knows exactly what they have. And of course, then after the end, they moved to new headquarters, and so it still continues to this day without the location that fostered everything. So let's take a look at the old Samson. It was really an old-time place. Just an immense number of drawers and shelves and so on with all kinds of things, as well as current hardware that one would expect to find in Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that. But there was so much more than that basic material. And the sales area was a center of everything. What I found really interesting was that you could see how much personal time was put into cataloging and storing the bits and pieces. An immense amount of labor has gone into checking on what they actually had, and handwriting all the drawers and shelves. Very impressive. As you can see here, there were all kinds of specialized parts and repair materials and so on. And you could find things here that there is no place else to go in Fairbanks, especially if something is of an older technology. Just it's almost an overwhelming collection of parts and particular size bolts and all the rest. And things were put in order if they weren't out in display. So all the different sizes of wrenches and hammers and all the rest are stored away, but available. Now, one thing that struck me about Samsons was that they supported the cabin culture, which is something that's a phenomena in Fairbanks. There are a lot of people who have lived in dry cabins, for example. My three children actually, at one time or another, when they were young adults, were staying in dry cabins. In fact, two of them for a while had no electricity. And so where do you go to find that kind of thing? And it's kind of under the radar, I think, for most Fairbanksians. But there were a lot of folks out there who were supported by the what's Samson Hads. Here we have a number of stoves. I'm quite sure that these particular models really won't meet these current standards, but for a stove in the woods somewhere, they were.
Marvin, it's like losing it.
I keep getting a. Am I on yet?
Yes,
Okay, I keep getting a mute
yes.
thing. Okay. So there are things that you don't usually find in hardware stores and even in Fairbanks that would support cabin culture. Things like lamps. Who sells this stuff anymore? And it's interesting to see that that these kinds of lamps are still being manufactured, and obviously they were doing a brisk business with this line of support for cabins. And a lot of their material is a manual. For example, this you go to most places and you find a meat grinder of some sort, and they usually have something that you plug in. Here, this is manual, and they're still being made. Lanterns. This is a mechanical clock. You don't have to plug it in, and it doesn't have batteries. It's hard to find something like that anymore, actually. And there are other kinds of stock that aren't exclusively for cabins, but are definitely a part of that kind of technology. A lot of this kind of kitchenware you can find these kinds of skillets, iron skillets at other stores, but it fits right in with what Samson offers. These things remind me of my childhood. Actually, I grew up on a Kansas farm. For a while, we didn't have any electricity, and we had a lot of stuff like this. They even had gas lights, interior gas lights. I don't think these were available anywhere except for Samson. And going back in time, Samson really is keenly aware of its past. And here we have a perpetual light that's never turned off using an older technology for the bulb. And my understanding is that they've taken this along for the the new location. But it's a symbol of Samson. And another thing that's interesting in the old store and the new store is that they have a number of historical pictures up. I didn't make copies of these, but they really add a certain amount of atmosphere. And so it's interesting to walk around looking at these things, even if you're not buying something. And one thing that was done in the old Samson, and I don't know how much is in the new Samson, but they put up stuff that had to do with earlier years in the enterprise. So a lot of stuff is put up on the walls where there's space, including the founders' boots. I mean, it's and you can see that we're talking about a setting that's much. It's really pretty much old time here. They used to do a brisk business in horseshoes, major supplier. And so those kinds of technology are a part of it. And they have a number of things up that had to do with the machine shop that was a part of Samson at one time. And here and there, older machines are kept, tools. There's a wall with some more of that, old tools and various things of that nature. And here's an old time notice. You can see it. It's a warning to the employees not to misplace a tool. And the Samson Hardware had access to warehouses behind the store. And this is what they looked like inside. Actually, when I took this picture, it was 20 below. It was a rather brisk enterprise at the time. But the total amount of space for storage really is phenomenal in old Samson. And at the end, when they had to abandon the old store, they put on a little feed for their loyal customers. And so there was always a kind of a good feeling going on here with Samson and their customers. And I know that there are a number of customers who've been with them for many decades. But when it was empty, the Department of Transportation, the DOT, let me in while there was still electricity and they hadn't started actual demolition yet. And so this is what the structure looks like without any merchandise. And you can see a number of construction details. This is, for example, is where the counter was. And this is where the rows of displays were once housed.
Marvin,
Yes.
can I interrupt? We had some comments in the chat room.
Okay.
Clark said, looking at all the old merchandise, he said, this is getting painful to realize what we can't find anymore and how good we had it for decades. But then Jennifer had an answer to that, and perhaps Jennifer would like to unmute and tell us about it.
Yes.
Jennifer, are you able to do that?
She has no microphone.
Okay, then let me read what she said. Samsons still stocks and sells many of these items today. We are having hard time with suppliers with COVID demand, but we still sell them in the new store. And she doesn't have a microphone today.
I'm really glad to hear from her. Yeah, this is good.
Okay, thank you.
I have a comment. This is Ruth Natman. And my son, Jay Van Veldhuizen, worked there at Samsons between his high school years and starting the university. And he was fascinated with the place. He'd spend hours in the back rooms looking for things for customers and getting acquainted with what was there. But he enjoyed his work there very much. I thought maybe he would join the history today from Washington State where he lives, but I see he's not on.
Yeah, well, I hope we hear from more folks who've actually had a close connection over the years with Samson.
What years did he work there?
You're asking me?
Yep. Yes.
Oh, do you think I'll remember what year he graduated from high school? Am I supposed to remember that?
No, what decade?
Well, he was born in 1960. And so it would have been late 1970s, I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I'm gonna go. Oh, you don't have to leave. Oh my God.
I'll comment. Jimmy Barrick was my father's uncle. My dad worked for Jimmy Barrick at Samson's.
Yeah. No, he was a legend. But the amount of space involved with all this stuff is really impressive. This is part of the big storeroom that's just off of the the main part of the store. It was often just full of stuff. This is in the main store. And everything was completely crowded. They have to use a specialized stairs, rollers to get to the top shelves here. And as they were starting to assess exactly what the demolition would look like, they bared a number of things that are of interest. They had to probe around quite a bit to make sure that they didn't have an asbestos problem, and so they opened up some of the walls, and there's some details that are of interest. For example, here they took the cover off the wall. And you can see how the construction was done, and evidence of what must have been a fire over here. And you can see bits and pieces of history, because construction was done at different times with different materials. This is the entry to the main storage room from the store here. And you can see that they, in probing to see if they had asbestos, that the materials used for this wall vary quite a bit from the material used at the last wall we've seen. And there are all kinds of little nooks and crannies. I have a series of photos that I didn't include today about with Don's barber shop, which is part of one corner of the building. And I kind of wished I'd included that. But then that was emptied also. The part of the main floor. You can see how the building has been held up with these supports. Here's some more materials that were used for different materials used for one of the walls. And there was some deterioration happening, of course, with the building of this age. It was not surprising. Generally speaking, though, everything was kept in working order really carefully. And there are a few artifacts still left, such as this fuel canister, no doubt propane, and but there wasn't very much of that. The place was pretty well cleaned out before the demolition began. And then the offices were upstairs, and this is the stairwell going up. This is at the head of the stairs as it's been opened up. And under the roof were some storage areas. My understanding is that this is where the firm kept its records and such, record storage, which my understanding is was quite voluminous. And then, of course, other materials as well. And this is a glimpse of what the offices looked like after everything moved out. I've included just a couple of photos here, but I have more. That they indicate the kind of technology involved, and so on. And this is what the view of the window, out the window on the upper level looked like. And every once in a while you'll find a little gem. Somebody has stashed this thing away, heaven knows from when. It looks like a fairly modern bottle, so it probably wasn't all that long ago that somebody had access to a snort once in a while. And then the demolition. I have a series of photos of this, but I think this kind of sums up what was going on. Heavy machines coming in and simply tearing everything down. There was no effort to save any of the materials or that sort of thing that I'm aware of. And the warehouses, only one of them survives. It's the old NC warehouse that I believe is older than Samson construction, but it's still there. Probably one of the very oldest structures in Fairbanks. And one thing that's interesting about it is that the construction technique was very common in Fairbanks. There's not much of a left, where the metal on the outside and a wood frame holding it all up. I have a number of detailed photos here of what the walls look like and the supports and all that. And the only structure left in this area is the Big Eye. And I've started an operation on that. I have pretty much complete photos of the basement and the second floor. But unfortunately, when I was there doing that, there was the bar was being used, and so I didn't go in to take pictures. But I would like to get into it, and I've got the equipment that I could use to do a panorama of the whole bar, and I'd like to get that done.
Marvin, this is Ruth Knappman. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the picture before that, is that who owns that warehouse building right now? Yes, that one. That is the oldest commercial building that is still existing in Fairbanks, and
Yes.
I hope they will save it and not be destroyed. Do you know who presently owns that? Is it Jack? Jakovich did own it.
Yes. I don't know. My understanding is it was Jakovich's property, but I don't know if anything's happened since then.
Well, I guess we need to get them the word that it's a historic building to be preserved.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right. Now,
Marvin, there were several other comments since you're
Okay.
close now. Clark said that was a magnificent array of photos to indicate the way things were. We didn't regularly move through those spaces. And then he commented that those are asbestos containing files. This is back when you were just showing the building being emptied. And then Patricia Schmidt is engaged in a conversation about what year did the original Samsons burn down? And Jennifer says that it was always on the banks of the Chena River since 1904. And then Elizabeth Cook asked what happened to the business records, and Jennifer says, we still have tons of paperwork and old invoices, records, bills of sale. You can just imagine so much through the years. There's a lot of comments. I think everyone could read them.
Yeah, I don't have that part up of the.
Okay. Jennifer says, in response to the fire, there have been many disasters since 1904, floods, fires, earthquakes, and more. They always would build on, but stayed in the same location. And the comment I think about the warehouse was as from Patricia, as far as I know, talking about Jakovich, he still owns it. And Jennifer says that building belongs to our brother, John Jakovich. He recently sold the Big I, but owns the land and building. And from Martin, I asked Joe when he tore down the old warehouse in front of your last picture, that he didn't know the lettered tin on the front was from. And Simon says Josh Davis rents boats and bikes out of the building in the summer. And Tom Callahan, Walt Pierce did some structure, something to the building in about 1907. If anyone would like to add more comments, just unmute yourself and we can hear what you have to say.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll give a little background. Back in the day, long ago, before metric and inch became the only way we did nuts and bolts and hardware, the important one was called Whitworth, and it was the original system of nuts and bolts and all the sizes and threads and everything. And it came out of Britain, and it was, the industrial world ran on it. And it kind of faded away until by the 60s and 70s, you only dealt with it on old British and British motorcycles and cars. So I was in Samsons in the early 90s, and there was somebody, I forget what I was there for. There was somebody in there that needed a bolt for a Chinese-made pump. A pump they'd gotten made in China back, when things weren't that great out of China. And it was Whitworth. And I knew what that meant and everything. Samson's had a healthy selection of Whitworth nuts and bolts, and this person was able to just pull out the right one and give it to him.
Yes.
Now it's historian interest only, but they were on top of it.
Yeah.
I bet you can't find those kind of Samson today.
If I had to guess, I would guess, I'd give odds yes rather than no, because I couldn't see them throwing it away. Somebody's still going to need it. And if you have the room to store it, you keep it around to help people out. I have 50-year-old things from bikes. I'm in the bicycle business. And Beaver Sports does too, just to solve that odd problem that comes along once a year.
Yeah.
It really comes down to space. If you have the space, you do it. If you're in a mall, you don't have the room, it's expensive, you'd throw it away. But I bet Jennifer can tell us.
Samson's was a Model T dealer in Fairbanks. And I was told when I got back with my Model A, when I got my Model A, that there was all kinds of parts at Samson's. And I went over there and they said, oh no, they were all hauled to the dump. And that wasn't true at all. The guy named Bill was the counterman there. And he said that Jimmy Barrick put all those parts into 55-gallon drums, welded them shut so nobody'd steal them, and shipped them out and sold them. And that sounded like Jimmy Barrick, not hauling them to the dump.
You just have to find the market.
Well, this is what all this stuff is about. The bridge that they put in. I don't necessarily think that's an improvement.
No, if I had to choose the 4-lane bridges or having Samsons in the old building, I'd go for Samsons.
Right. And so, you know, the whole Riverside, it looks differently too, of course, with all this. I took a picture of what the area looked like from the Masonic Hall. So I went upstairs to the Masonic Hall and took this picture. And of course, now the Masonic building is gone. I do have a small set of photographs of the interior of the Masonic temple, though.
Ooh, could you show those?
Yes, I've got. I have a series of projects I've been working on. One is to just take pictures of structures, and I have well over 100 photos of buildings that aren't there anymore. Mostly houses and log cabins and that sort of thing. And then I have a series on hotels and apartment buildings that have gone away and just are mostly on empty ground now. I have a set of during the Fairbanks hotel, which was on the land that the new credit union is on downtown, and so on. I would really appreciate any help I might get in terms of gaining access to some of these places. If people who are listening have some kind of knowledge or ability to do this. I don't have very many photos of interiors. I really would like a lot more. I want to do some work with various artifacts as well. I haven't discussed it in detail, but I think that some of the older construction operations still have some things of interest, like Wilbur's sheet metal operation. I have just a couple pictures of that, but I would like to photograph the machines that he used and the tools and so on that they, at least a year or so ago, you still had. So if anybody has an in for some of this stuff and knows about it or is able to grant some permission, I'd like to hear about it. It's an ongoing project. Up to date, I have pictures of about 700 buildings in Fairbanks.
Do you know Mark Fage?
Yes, but I'm not close to him. I've met him.
That's sort of first half of the century industrial, sort of his artistic heritage. He's very interested in it.
Good. That's a good. That's a good.
Yeah.
Good thing, yeah. And
his old family. I mean, there's at least his parents. So he knows a lot of people. He might be a good contact for.
My wife grew up on next door to the Fages, 1/8.
He's got that workshop and gallery. What's that called? Industrial. Is that Industrial Way there?
Yeah. I know where it is. That's good. Yeah.
You just walk. He's a great guy to talk to. I mean, he's interested in everything you can.
Yeah. Well, I've had some conversations with some architects, and one of them said that the reason that so many buildings have disappeared in Fairbanks is that most of them have been rental properties. And so when the owners needed something done, the inspector would come in and say, oh, well, it's not just your plumbing, your electric system has to be fixed, and so on and so forth. And so they found it easier to destroy the place than it was to try to bring everything up to code. And one thing that I find interesting, but it's kind of ugly, is the construction that went on in the late 40s and 50s and even 60s that were really El Cheapo operations. And the thing about it is that that's the way a lot of people lived. And I'd like to document it, even though don't have the attractiveness of say, a log cabin. So I think they've been ignored.
Yeah, there's a whole like societal and economic meaning to that that's worth paying
Yeah.
attention to.
Yeah.
Same thing post pipeline. There was a rash of quick and cheap subdivision building. It's its own sort of interesting thing.
Yeah.
And the houses are not just sort of McMansions. They're big enough. They're very badly built, and there's a lot of them. But
Well,
50 years ago.
In the mid 70s, I was looking at actually some of those places. And I found one building that actually was wired with lamp cords in the walls.
Mhm.
It was outside of city limits, and they didn't have anybody inspecting.
Oh, so it was a homemade building, a owner
No,
built.
it was a construction company, but
Oh
they were
my.
operating outside of the city.
Well, the cabin.
Marvin, we have a couple comments from Martin. He asked he says he hopes you have a picture of when the pile driver crane fell into the river.
No, I don't. I didn't go downtown to take a picture of it. I knew about it, but I didn't make it there.
And then he also says, if you could show the photo of the front tin on the old warehouse, we could play Wheel of Fortune to figure out what the words were for the business.
Well, there's a sign on part of it that NC code. So it's a Northern Canadian NC a warehouse.
We must have pictures of the old cabin on First Avenue that we are as the home of Eilson, the pilot, when he taught mathematics over at Maine School in Fairbanks. And I was shocked to see it gone one day when I was taking tourists around town. And I understood that it was owned by a lady who lived in Anchorage. So maybe she didn't know the history of the cabin. Right now, it's just a hole in the ground. I don't think they ever did anything with it, but it was sad to see them take down that old building too.
Well, there used to be a whole aura around First. Several interesting old buildings are on it, and they've pretty much all disappeared.
The property that Fox bought. And I spoke to him personally, and I said, I hope you're not destroying these little cabins, that they ought to be preserved, even if not preserved at the same location. He said, oh no, I'm not going to tear them down. He says, they're going to stay there. Then the next thing we knew, they all just went down one night.
Yes.
And his building came in there after that. So I kind of lost respect, sorry to say.
Yeah. Well, one of the programs that I'd like to do is on Weeks Field. And I think the title would be Fairbanks Eats its Airport, because there was an airport there, and then it eventually turned into Fairview Mansions, and then that has disappeared, and so on and so forth. But it shows, one of the things about Fairbanks is that there always have been little cabins out in the woods somewhere, and farms and such, but the main growth of the population was in subdivisions. And I'd like to do some work on these. I mean, island homes, for example, and I think there are like something like 15 major subdivisions, maybe more, that added to the area's population. A lot of them outside of city limits, but that's how the population has grown, really.
There's a note from Jennifer in the chat saying that they lost about 10,000 square feet of space when they moved to the new building. So they don't have everything that they used to have, but they still got a lot. I just want to say that my husband really loves Samsons, and every time we talk about Samsons, I think about him because his nickname was Old Timey, and he just loved that store. He could go in and wander even in the back and find what he wanted.
Another theme could be airplanes and Fairbanks are the same age, and they kind of grew up together. And Alaska and aviation. I mean, there's a lot of stories there where, I mean, Jimmy Doolittle and what's his name, Billy Mitchell, major Alaska connections. The Lend-Lease, where all the planes flew through here, and just every step of the way, Fairbanks and airplanes were intertwined. And go back to the earliest days and start with the first airport. That'd be a great set of stories to tell.
Yeah, I used to be a good friend of H.O. Williams, and he was a pilot active in Fairbanks just before the Second World War, and then of course he remained in Fairbanks for the rest of his life, or up in Central. And he said one of the things he liked is after he'd done his job, he would land the plane, get out and walk to his house. I mean, and I have some aerial photography of that area, and it's interesting how tiny Fairbanks really was then, before the Second World War. Another thing, of course, is that virtually nothing was paved, including the airport.
4,800 people in 1948. I was looking for a cast iron front for a barrel stove a couple of years ago, so I went and saw Roy Wilbur. Roy said, "Oh no, you just go to Samson Hardware. They got them," and that was true.
Yeah.
And speaking of Roy Wilbur, you spoke earlier of the sheet metal shop. Well, his shop is like a mini museum in itself. He has a lot of old things there, which is a lovely place to visit, just to go to see all his old things, whether you need any work done or not.
Yes, I agree, and I very much hope I can do something with that.
Well, I'm sure I can help you with arrange to get some permission if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, well, I had a informal discussion. He seemed open to it, but then I haven't followed up on it yet. So that might help a lot.
Okay.
My goal is to when I finish this project, I want to be able to provide them to move them over to the UA archives, well identified, so that it be of some use. What my goal is. Any more questions or comments?
A beautiful job, Marvin. I've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Good job.
Thanks.
Oh, do you know what happened to the coal bunker? Was that the end of it when they carted off the bits?
Yes, actually, I have photos of that too. But originally, it was just taken apart, sawed apart, and it was in a pile. And then it kind of evaporated. I don't know who has those parts anymore, but the lumber was still in wonderful condition. You know, but
It's
it was sawed up.
a sad story with, sometimes I wondered if they kind of schemed it out where, oh, we'll take it down and then everyone will forget about it and then we can toss it or whatever. But it
I don't
would have
know.
been a great thing to save somewhere.
Yeah, well, this is something that happens a lot in Fairbanks, and is that there are a few people who are really concerned about something, but they don't have enough power or money to save something. You know, the whole business of the Nenana steam.
You're going to lose that.
You know, I mean, maybe it'll be saved. I mean, a lot of people have a strong interest in it, but you know, it's really tough to make that kind of thing work. You know, to save something.
Well, Marvin, I think it's quite clear that we need you to do this again. We're scheduled to do it once a month at 80 at Home Fairbanks, and we have enjoyed opening this up to the public. Marvin clearly has a lot more photos of old Fairbanks, and I hope he'll do more for us.
Oh, so do I.
At least the old stick train station got protected, and it's still available.
Okay, any final questions about Samson's Hardware?
Does everybody know where they are? If anyone doesn't, maybe it'd be good just to do a little plug for how to find them. I want them to stay in business. I really do.
Yes, please.
Is it still for sale?
I think it's
The
still-
sign on the building said it was still for sale. It's on Phillipsfield Road.
Well, the problem with selling it is that it's a protected history.
Yes.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming, and we hope to see everyone next month. And thank you, Marvin.
Okay.
Thank you.
A lot.
Thank you very much.